In 1938, two naturalists left Kalimpong to walk into a blank space on the map, a land where no road led, no atlas dared, and discovery waited beneath the shadow of Namcha Barwa.
Hey, glad you're here. Welcome to the Himalayan Journals. Here on this channel, we bring to you real stories from century old field notes. We try to keep it simple and calm here. Think of it as a documented history of the Himalayas from the early 1900s, covering stories of indigenous wisdom, epic expeditions, and groundbreaking science, passed on just as they were recorded. Subscribe, zone out, binge.
In the spring of 1938, two naturalists, Frank Ludlow and George Sheriff, set out from Kalimpong to explore one of the least known regions of the eastern Himalaya, the valleys of Tsangpo and Kongbo in southeastern Tibet. Their destination lay between the Tsangpo River and the towering walls of Namcha Barwa. Much of this country had never been mapped, and much of its flora and bird life was still unknown. To them, the thought of walking into a land that was still blank on the map was reason enough to go. They left Kalimpong on the 22nd of February and journeyed north through Gyansa and Setang. Their companion, Dr. G. Taylor of the British Museum, had been forced to delay his departure because of an operation in London. He promised to follow later, and true to his word, he reached Molo from England on the very day Ludlow and Sheriff returned there from Pachak Shiri, a coincidence that spoke well of the expedition's planning. From the bleak plateau around Fari, the men descended into the warmer Tsangpo Valley, where willows and poplars were bursting into leaf, and the river spread nearly a mile wide. They floated downstream in yak-skin coracles to Setang, watching cranes, geese, and cormorants along the water's edge. From there, they turned east, following the course of the Tsangpo, and then climbing over the high Putrang La, where rhododendrons, birch, and juniper marked the threshold of greener country. On those slopes, they saw two pheasants, the arid and the Tibetan, rare sights after months of barren uplands. Beyond the pass, they reached Nang Dzong and then Molo, close to the Pachak Shiri district. Their goal lay beyond the snow-covered Lola, a knife-edge pass which they crossed before dawn when the snow was still hard. As they descended into the southern forests, the dull browns of the highlands gave way to the vivid pinks and golds of rhododendrons and the bright purples of primulas. After weeks of bare landscapes, the sight of a single flower quickened their pace. Soon, they were walking through a Himalayan spring in full bloom. Lalung, the main settlement of Pachak Shiri, lay in a wide plain surrounded by pasture hills and the slow-flowing Siam River. Here, they studied birds, the rediscovered barwing, unseen since 1875, and the high-speed, spine-tailed swift. They also found temminck's tragopan and Sclater's monal, both elusive pheasants that had evaded them in 1936. The people of the valley lived in fear of raids from the Loba tribes, and the explorers heard tales of recent ambushes. For 10 days they stayed in Lalung, plagued by biting flies but rewarded by rare specimens. By mid-May, they were back at Molo, where Taylor arrived, cheerful and energetic after his long journey. Together, the three divided their work. Sheriff went west to the headwaters of the Lilung Chu, while Ludlow and Taylor followed the Tsangpo eastward to Tsela Dzong. Along the way, they encountered flooded torrents and Loba workers rebuilding bridges. The so-called slaves, they noted, were free to leave but stayed on, their women small, cheerful and bedecked with blue beads. At Tseladzong, they met the young Tsangpo, who warned them not to go to Pimlico because of smallpox. His wife, worried about freckles, accepted their improvised cure of lime water and milk. From the nearby village of Tse, they explored valleys leading into the main range. On the Lhula, at 14,600 feet, rain fell day and night for a week, yet the slopes were alive with alpine plants and the strange call of the wood snipe. From there, they crossed the Tsangpo in dugout boats to the southern passes, where Taylor, a Mechanopsis expert, saw 17 species of the Himalayan poppy, 5 of them on the Sangla alone. Their route took them through the Rongchu Valley, the Doshongla, and finally to Kyala, beneath the twin peaks of Namcha Barwa and Kyala Peri. For once the monsoon broke, and for a week the skies were clear. They watched the Tsangpo transform from a placid mile-wide river into a raging torrent crashing through a gorge only 100 yards across, throwing up spray and rainbows in the sun. It was one of the grandest sights in the Himalaya. By late July, they regrouped at Tseladzong, where months of pressed plants filled 15 loads, over 3,000 specimens. Soon after, Ludlow set out again, this time alone, to the high passes of Pome and the valleys beyond Gyamda. There were new flowers to collect, new birds to note, and one alarming moment when a runaway yak swam off with his bedding. In August, word came that Taylor had fallen ill. Ludlow hurried back, but by the time he reached him, Taylor was recovering, helped, it seemed, by nothing more than rest, milk, and patience. Autumn came, and with it, the long road home. They gathered seeds and living plants, packed and sent them to England. On the Bimbi La near Tsari, hillsides blazed red with a sea of berberis leaves. It was a fitting farewell to a year of discovery. By late October, they crossed the last passes and looked down upon the hazy plains of Assam. The great rivers and snowfields lay behind them, and the men who had walked through unmapped Tibet returned quietly to a world that suddenly seemed, in their own words, rather flat and tame.